Today I'm doing something that I never do, and I suggest that you don't either. I'm doing a controlled burn, and I want to talk about why I think that this is a scenario why I should, and why for the most part I don't think you should do a controlled burn. So first off, why I'm going ahead and doing this burn is because I'm really in a scenario where I don't have a lot of choice. This is a kind of a wet area. The whole bottom is wet, so I could run some sheep in here, but I would worry about hoof rot. I would have to hold them in here for quite a while. There's also this damage that I'm having to my road. I've got to get this fixed very quickly. So this is a bit of an emergency situation. I think this might be the best scenario in this case. Ordinarily, I wouldn't suggest doing this, but in some cases, I do think a controlled burn might be the best case. The amount of time and pressure that it would take with the sheep to get this all knocked back, I think would definitely start to be hard on their hooves. Ideally, if you're going to put sheep in a wet area, you're going to allow them to have a nice dry spot as well. But if you want to knock a spot like this down, then you really have to put them in tight to get it done. The other part is all of the brush that's on here that's dead is actually shading it out and preventing winter grass from growing. The winter grass really helps to keep this creek from washing out. So I really feel like that my best bet is going to be to burn this in order to control any future washout, even though normally I wouldn't do that, and I'm going to get into why. So controlled burns actually have quite a few negatives, and one of the biggest negatives is all of this carbon that's on the ground. You can see we're burning up huge amounts of carbon here. And if you leave this carbon, then you can actually increase the carbon in your soil while also not putting the carbon into the atmosphere, obviously. Not to say that we're against burning when it's necessary, but in many cases, if I'm trying to improve this soil for the long-term health of my land and food that I'm producing here, then burning is not going to be the best choice. Not to mention all of the mineral profile that's going to be in your weeds and the greens that's going to be there. There's not a high amount of minerals that's in the wood, but there is a lot of fungus and carbon that's going to be wrapped up in that. So this is kind of an emergency situation because we really do have to get this cleaned up now. And I can't get in here with a brush hog because if you watch the old video, I left quite a few stumps behind in order to help hold the creek in. And I've got to, you can't get in there with a brush hog and clean up all of those stumps. So this is actually a fairly decent method for this. And like I said with the sheep, we didn't put the sheep in here because, sometimes you have to worry about sheep in wet areas. Now, sometimes you can have them in here for short periods of time, but as far as like really, I guess, mob grazing in this area, I wouldn't be able to do that because I would have to start worrying about their hooves and parasites for this area with the duration that I would have to leave them here in order to get them to actually knock this down. And I could also leave cows in there, but I would worry that the cows would actually cause washing on this creek. So in this example, I really felt like that one of my best bets for this was to actually go ahead and burn. And another thing is all of this tall brush, if I just leave it here, like I said, I would normally brush hog it, but I can't. So if I just leave this brush here, then the brush is actually going to start, it's going to shade out any winter grasses. So what I'll do once this is all cleaned up is I will pre-seed this with winter grasses, which is something that we really have a big advantage of here in the south. And I can pre-seed this and really get it to hold those banks in a lot better, which is far superior than these weeds being left behind. Now these weeds would be good if I wasn't going to grow anything else. If I was just going to let it sit, then I would rather leave the weeds there. The other reason I want to go ahead and burn this out is because this is a bit of a fire hazard where this is. I don't want it to just sit here dry like this little dry patch, because if it sits dry, these are some thick, heavy weeds, and they'll actually be dry for quite some time. And so I really don't want to, like they'll be dry into next year, and they will actually hold back some of the summer growth for next year. So I want to be sure that I don't do that either. So that's really kind of the decision for going ahead and burning this out. But a lot of the reasons why I don't burn more often, because so many people talk about the positives of burning, and there are some positives to it, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But I don't like to just burn as a default mode. It is not at all what you would see in nature. It is not at all a normal thing. Ordinarily, we want to see things decompose, rot, and actually build life. Burning actually gets rid of all of the food for life, so that there is nothing left for life. Now, the reason it gets a good rap is because it leaves behind a lot of potassium, which is part of your NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that's basically it leaves behind a high dense amount of fertilizer, and that's why you see a lot of green come up afterwards. That's the reason why a lot of people assume that it's really, really good for your soil, which is also why back in the when synthetic fertilizer first came out, they assumed that fertilizer was good for your soil because it made everything green. What they weren't looking at is what it did to the microbes. High amounts of fertilizer is not so great for your microorganisms because it can burn them out. And then just simply the burning process here is not so good for your microorganisms either. Not to mention the fact that we've already said that it's burning up all the food that could possibly be left for your microorganisms. Like I said, there's a place, and this is one of the places. Another place that I would consider this a good benefit is sometimes it is used to prevent forest fire. You can actually control burn in a forest and prevent forest fires. Now, a video I just came out with was where we talked about composting logs rapidly. And we were able to compost logs faster than has ever been done. And it's a video I highly suggest you checking out. It could actually be the future for forest management rather than burning. So I'm going to drop a link in the description where you can check that video out. Homesteaders can use it, farmers can use it, and forest management can definitely use this method. Now you can see here how it turned out. And you can also see the stumps and why we ended up not being able to brush hog it. Now if you want to know why we left the stumps, I'm going to leave a link for another video. You can check all of those videos out, and that's going to help you to understand how to increase the value of your land and grazing on your land, but also how to keep washouts and how to build soil. I highly recommend that you check out all of those videos. Guys, this is all I have for today. I appreciate you watching this far, and I really hope that you can stick around, subscribe, and learn to manage your land better.